we're talking about the fact that the Father and the conjoint actor and the universal absolute are interrelating deities. The universal absolute hooks up the other two absolutes. The conjoint actor functionally interrelates matter and spirit, the sun and paradise. And the Father, of course, interrelates everything. And so it's natural that these associators should constitute a trinity in and of themselves. Now, while we're at it, let's look at page 1151 and take a look at non-triunity associations. These are triunities which do not contain the first source and center. And they give us just two of them here. I think that's enough for us to know about. They give us they call them triodities. And one is the triodity of potentiality, and the other is the triodity of actuality. One is the three absolutes of potential, deity, universal, and qualified. The other consists of the three absolutes of actuality, the sun, paradise, and the infinite spirit. And they don't classify the Father. Elsewhere in these papers, they refuse to classify the Father as either actual or potential. They just say he's original. The triodities represent an awfully valuable concept because these are good ways of symbolizing all growth. If it isn't here, it involves the triodity of potentiality. And if it is here, it's held in the gravity grasps of the triodity of actuality. All evolution is nothing more than a transfer of reality from one triodity to the other, from the potential to the actual. Let's say that a star cools down. It gets very cold, very, very dense. The atoms get packed in closer and closer together. The electrons move in as heat loss equivalates to a slowing down of speed of rotation. And they can only maintain that speed if they give up distance. So the electrons are hunching in closer and closer and closer to the nucleuses. And this thing can go on through atomic condensation to electronic condensation until this stuff begins to approach the solidity of paradise absolutum. Until it begins to approach. But as it approaches ultimatonic condensation, the whole thing blows higher than a kite, and you're back to the Pewson energy level. So matter can recirculate, but only life and personal life can become extinguished. When they say now that the first source and center is primal in all domains, this means more to you now, doesn't it? As you examine a portraiture of the mechanics of being primal, this is how he does it. He has, first of all, a unity relationship, then duality relationships, directly with each of these absolutes, including himself, and now triunity relationships. He is related to the universe as, they're talking about how does he work today. Material gravity focuses in the Isle of Paradise. And that's why he's got to be right at the center of Upper Paradise. He can't move because he has to be there for this machine to be absolute. As mind converges in the infinite spirit, as cosmic mind converges in the seven master spirits, and as the factualizing mind of the Supreme converges in Majestat, Dorothy's boyfriend. As spirit converges in the eternal Son, as capacity for deity action is in the deity absolute, as capacity for infinity response is in the unqualified absolute, and as these two absolutes, qualified and unqualified, are coordinated and unified in and by the universal absolute, and as the potential personality of an evolutionary moral being or of any other moral being is centered in the personality of the universal Father. You see, he's retired from direct contact with things except in the field of personality. Here he did not retire. Otherwise he works always through something. Let's compare that with something in paper 10. In page 5, we were talking about how the first source and center is related to the universe. On page 111, they discuss how he functions outside of Havona. Now, in this first listing, there was no qualifications. This is how he's related to the universe, I deduce, including Havona. But here is how he functions outside of Havona in the phenomenal universes. As a creator through his creator sons. As a controller through the gravity center of paradise. As spirit through the eternal Son. As mind through the conjoint creator. As a father, direct contact with all creatures through the personality circuits. As a person, he acts directly throughout creation by his fragments, in mortal man, for the thought adjusters, as total deity, only in the Trinity. It's very interesting to compare those two things, isn't it? The difference between relationship and function. You see, here we're dealing with actualities, so the absolutes don't come in to this listing at all.
I feel much more comfortable right here.
Of course you do. This is what is. It'll never be complete from a quantitative standpoint, but it can become functional from a qualitative standpoint. The second level, I don't think, can ever function in infinity, because I don't think God the Absolute can ever be finished in the sense that God the Supreme and God the Ultimate can be. But that doesn't mean he can't be there. And that doesn't mean that there can't be a growing function, an eternally growing function on that level. The Trinity of Trinities could become functionally operative only in eternity. And as long as we have time, there's a future. And as long as we have a future, there's something that's left to be done. On page 644, they say that the absolutes are unified in the universal, coordinated in the ultimate, conditioned in the supreme, and time-space modified in the sevenfold. Here we're considering the downstepping of potential, whether it is material energy starting out as absoluta, segregata, ultimata, gravita, coming down to where the Supreme can get a hold of it, and it passes through the ultimate on the way. This would be true of spiritual potential as well as material potential. This is true, I think, of mind potential. On sub-infinite levels, there are three absolutes, but in infinity, they appear to be one. On paradise, there are three personalizations of deity, but in the Trinity, they are one. Then they go on to say, which came first? Was it the absolute? Is the absolute antecedent to the Trinity? Or is the Trinity antecedent to the absolute? Is the unqualified absolute a force presence independent of the Trinity? Does the presence of the deity absolute connote the unlimited function of the Trinity? And is the universal absolute the final function of the Trinity, even a Trinity of Trinities? Well, they say, fine, let's have the absolute as the ancestor of all things. Gee, we feel good right away. We got it down to one thing now. But we can't accept this because the Trinity is eternal. Nothing is ancestral to the Trinity. All we can do is to say then that the absolute is to all universe intelligences the impersonal and coordinate reaction of the Trinity, maybe of Trinities, to all basic and primary space situations, intra-universal and extra-universal. In other words, this is the entity who is concerned with events of the present in terms of the cosmos infinite. This absolute, the three absolutes, is reacting always in terms of as though we'd come to the end and it was all here. This is a pure eternity reaction impinging on time. We react differently as our lives develop. Boys meet girls, get married, have children, and then react like parents, unfortunately. But let's say the three absolutes, even when they're in puberty, are reacting as though they were grandparents. You follow me? They're reacting in terms of the future and the past, and of course, that reaction impinges on the present as something unfathomable. Because how can you fathom out a reaction which has no relationship to time but still registers in time? You follow me? A 12-year-old who makes decisions in terms of his grandparent attitude would be a very mysterious 12-year-old, wouldn't he? And they say, now look, as far as you're concerned, accept the Paradise Trinity as final. This is your best working hypothesis. And if you want to go beyond that, then set up the I Am as ancestral to all things. If you must have a single starting point, you can't have the absolute. Because the Trinity's eternal, you say, all right, but now the absolute's eternal. And I want one. All right, then take the I Am as your best speculation. The I Am as the primal cause and unqualified source of both the Trinity and the absolute. When, therefore, we crave to entertain a personal concept of the absolute, we revert to our ideas and ideals of the Paradise Father. When we desire to facilitate comprehension or augment consciousness of this otherwise impersonal absolute, we revert to the fact that the Universal Father is the existential Father of absolute personality. The Eternal Son is the absolute person, though not in the experiential sense, the personalization of the absolute. That would be God the absolute. And then we go on to envisage the experiential trinities as culminating in the experiential personalization of the deity absolute, while conceiving the universal absolute as constituting the universe and the extra-universe phenomena of the manifest presence of the impersonal activities of the unified and coordinated deity associations of supremacy, ultimacy, and infinity, the Trinity of Trinities. So far, we considered only the third floor of the firehouse. But the Father projected 2 more floors. And this is where the mud really hit the fan. Any tensions which were set up topside are small compared to the tensions which are set up when topside is related to bottom side. Over on page 1158, they talk about what happened when God projected 2 more floors in the firehouse. Page 1158 has got a subtitle there, Promulgation of Finite Reality. Prior to the deitization of the finite, it would appear that all reality diversification took place on absolute levels. That's all we've been talking about, pretty much all day. But the volitional act promulgating finite reality connotes a qualification of absoluteness and implies the appearance of relativities. While we present this narrative as a sequence and portray the historic appearance of the finite as a direct derivative of the absolute, it should be borne in mind that transcendentals both preceded and succeeded all that is finite. Transcendental ultimates are, in relation to the finite, both causal and consummational. On the next page it says, from the creature standpoint, that which is transcendental would appear to have eventuated as a consequence of the finite. From the eternity viewpoint, in anticipation of the finite. And there are those who have considered it a pre-echo of the finite. And listen, that thing is borne out in our whole discussion of this energy series. At the third level of energy, it's called ultimata. It's the energy domain of God the Ultimate. And the 6th level of energy was Trinosta, which is the energy associated with the transcendentalers on paradise. We meet the ultimate coming and going, don't we? The pre-echo. Finite possibility is inherent in the infinite, but the transmutation of possibility to probability and inevitability must be attributed to the self-existent free will of the first source and center, activating all triunity associations. Only the infinity of the Father's will could ever have so qualified the absolute level of existence as to eventuate an ultimate or to create a finite. With the appearance of relative and qualified reality, there comes into being a new cycle of reality, the growth cycle, a majestic downsweep from the heights of infinity to the domain of the finite, forever swinging inward to paradise and deity, always seeking those high destinies commensurate with an infinity source. These inconceivable transactions mark the beginning of universe history, mark the coming into existence of time itself. To a creature, the beginning of the finite is the genesis of reality. As viewed by creature mind, there is no actuality conceivable prior to the finite. This newly appearing finite reality exists in 2 original phases. Primary maximums, the supremely perfect reality, the Havona type of universe and creature. Secondary maximums, the supremely perfected reality, the superuniverse type of creature and creation. But they're talking about it settled in light and life here now. These are the 2 original manifestations, the constitutively perfect and the evolutionally perfected. The 2 are coordinate in eternity relationships, but within the limits of time they are seemingly different. A time factor means growth to that which grows. Secondary finites grow. Hence, those that are growing must appear as incomplete in time. But these differences, which are so important this side of paradise, are non-existent in eternity. We speak of the perfect and the perfected as primary and secondary maximums, but there is still another type. Trinitizing and other relationships between the primaries and the secondaries result in the appearance of tertiary maximums. Things, meanings, and values that are neither perfect nor perfected, yet are coordinate with both ancestral factors. That's cross-personalization. And then, when the Father did this, there were repercussions and responses. The deity response involved the appearance of the three levels of supremacy: power, spirit, and mind. The universe response involves setting up the super-universe space level. The creature repercussion involved Havana natives and folks like us. The divinity response involved the appearance of God the Sevenfold. And then let's spend just a couple of minutes on transcendentals, because we should touch on the second floor of the firehouse. Transcendentals are sub-infinite and sub-absolute, but super-finite and super-creatural. That which is transcendental is not necessarily non-developmental, but it is super-evolutional in the finite sense. Neither is it non-experiential, but it is super-experience as such is meaningful to creatures. They get something up there which is experience, but it's not what we would recognize as experience. Perhaps the best illustration of such a paradox is the central universe of perfection. It is hardly absolute. Only the Paradise Isle is truly absolute in the materialized sense. Neither is it a finite evolutionary creation, as are the seven super-universes. Havona is eternal, but not changeless, in the sense of being a universe of non-growth. It is inhabited by creatures, Havona natives, who never were actually created. There is always the infinite spirit, for they are eternally existent. Havona thus illustrates something which is not exactly finite, nor yet absolute. Havona further acts as a buffer between absolute paradise and finite creations, still further illustrating the function of transcendentals. But Havona itself is not a transcendental. It is Havona. It won't categorize. As the supreme is associated with finites, so the ultimate is identified with transcendentals. But though we thus compare supreme and ultimate, they differ by something more than degree. The difference is also a matter of quality. The ultimate is something more than a super-supreme projected on the transcendental level. The ultimate is all of that, but more. The ultimate is an eventuation of new deity realities, the qualification of new phases of the theretofore unqualified. And then they list 10 things that have to do with the appearance of the transcendental level. The ultimate, the master universe and its architects, 2 orders of paradise force organizers, certain modifications in space potency, certain values of spirit, certain meanings of mind, absonite qualities and realities, omnipotence, omniscience, and omnipresence, and space. In the eternity of the past, the forces of the absolutes, the spirits of the deities, and the personalities of the gods stirred in response to the primordial self-will of self-existent self-will.
That's a mouthful.
Isn't it? It's the yolk of the egg. In this universe age, we are all witnessing the stupendous repercussions of the far-flung cosmic panorama, of the sub-absolute manifestations of the limitless potentials of all these realities. And it is altogether possible that the continued diversification of the original reality of the first source and center may proceed onward and outward through age upon age, on and on, into the faraway and inconceivable stretches of absolute infinity. Dearly beloved, we are in on the ground floor of this deal. They're still offering common stock at a discount in this proposition. Should we go adventuring in the firehouse?
Yeah.
We just completed the construction of the firehouse yesterday. We spent most of yesterday on the third floor. For the last half hour of yesterday, we considered how the 1,600-mile second floor and the 2-inch first floor got constructed. I'd like to compare those 2 inches with the 1,600 miles, because most of this book is about the 2 inches, and that seems frightfully big. In the foreword, they say that reality is comprehended by finite beings as partial, relative, and shadowy. The maximum deity reality, fully comprehensible by evolutionary finite creatures, is embraced within the Supreme Being. So, pretty much what we call real is not what the authors of these papers would call real. Here on page 1162, they take inventory of reality. They start out with incomplete finites. That's us. This is the present status of the ascending creatures of the grand universe, the present status of Urantia mortals. This level embraces creature existence from the planetary human up to, but not including, destiny attainers. It pertains to universes from early physical beginnings up to, but not including, settlement in light and life. This level constitutes the present periphery of creative activity in time and space. It appears to be moving outward from paradise, for the closing of the present universe age, which will witness the grand universe attainment of light and life, will also and surely witness the appearance of some new order of developmental growth in the first outer space level. That's a pretty good description in one paragraph, I think, of rather much of what's going on in the 7 super universes. A finaliter is an incomplete finite. He's not a destiny attainer. In contrast to a spirit-fused or a sun-fused mortal, who is a complete finite, they've attained destiny. So also as a mighty messenger attained destiny. And of course, destiny attainment pertains to the present universe age. The fact that a mighty messenger is a non-growing being doesn't mean that he is eternally non-growing. He just doesn't grow now. And this now has to do with the present universe age, which we've estimated is maybe half over, and it's, well, what was it, 40,000 trillions of years.
Build a world for us. Well, he got our world. No, think of it. Sadler had a like.
Let's derive a planet and achieve destiny, shall we? We won't go into outer space, we'll go into Urantia space. While this is going on in outer space, the story, I believe, starts just the same as ours, because apparently those nebulae out there are just like the nebulae in Urantia. But about halfway through the story, it's different. About halfway through our story, we're going to get universe power directors coming in. And this won't be true in the first outer space level. The associate transcendental master force organizers will continue right on in charge of that physical creation. So, as we tell this story, up until the time the power centers of Orvantan take over, I believe the story in Orvantan and the story in the first and even the second outer space level runs parallel. But from that point on, they diverge. And this raises an interesting question about the difference between Orvantan and the first outer space level. I believe that first outer space level is going to be extraordinarily old when we invade it. And it seems to me that it might be possible that it would be physically stabilized before life is ever implanted out there, so that there would be no more astronomical collisions, accidents, and whatnot. In other words, they would have really set the thing up physically before they ever went into it with life and mind and spirit. That's my speculation. You will find no support for that in the papers.
Why wouldn't they have done that in our case then?
Because this was the first one, and they wanted to get going. Right. Now they're working on this one, which gives them this fabulous amount of time to get that one set up. The only thing before us was Havona, which was always there. That's why the super universe space level is going to be different from anything before or anything which comes after. Yes, it will be different from the four outer space levels in a way that they will not differ from each other, I don't think. I think in the four outer space levels, the differences are more quantitative, whereas here, the difference between us and Havona or us and them is essentially qualitative. I think the four outer space levels are far more akin to each other than we are to them or Havona, or than Havona is to them. And that's because God the Ultimate is evolving all through these four outer space levels. Nothing ends when an outer space level ends, in the sense that the Supreme Being ends when we are completed. In a sense, now here's where our firehouse breaks down a little bit. In a sense, the super universe space level is the first floor of the firehouse, and the four outer space levels are the second floor. And you should ask me then, where is Havona? Havona is on all of these floors. Havona is finite, Havona is absonite, Havona is at least co-absolute.
But Paradise would only be on one floor.
Paradise isn't in the firehouse. Paradise is the foundation on which the firehouse is built, and Paradise is also the hypothetical roof of the third floor. Paradise is both alpha and omega in relation to the firehouse.
Full circle.
Yes. If they could reach the roof of the third floor, they would have attained an experiential paradise value. And I know that the firehouse is built on Paradise. Paradise is the foundation of the firehouse. Paradise is before the firehouse and after the firehouse. It is below and above. But before and after is a better word than below and above. I'm going to do some speculating. I'm going to do some guessing. I'm going to tell a story which even the divine counselor won't tell, because he knows more than I do. And if he tells it, he's guilty of evil, and I can tell it because I don't know any better. We will now proceed to unscrew the inscrutable. But the papers encourage me to speculate, at the same time warning all of us that our speculations are going to be false. They tell us that our universe romancings are seldom factual, but even so they may contain much that's truth. This encourages me to have courage along with humility. I think the third source and center has to do with prying loose from the unqualified absolute his grasp on space potency. I think this is a transaction having its roots way back in the deities of paradise. We are told that the third person of deity, not as the infinite spirit, but as the infinite manipulator, does manipulate the forces of paradise. If he can operate on an absolute actuality, I believe he can also operate on an absolute potentiality. This is the logical basis for my speculation. If we have to work out the mechanics of this, if it's not done directly by the infinite manipulator, then I believe it is done by him through the Paradise Trinity, activating the deity absolute, which would cause repercussions in the unqualified absolute. We know that that relationship works because we're so told in the papers. When the Paradise Trinity takes snuff, the unqualified absolute sneezes. Golly, I wonder how that sounds on your verse. I feel almost blasphemous sometimes in trying to get at these things, but I think if your intent is good, you could call God anything and he wouldn't mind, you know?
Sure.
People are that way. Yes, Ruth.
It's hard for me to see why that would be the sequence. Using sequence.
I'm trying to get at the unqualified absolute. I know I can approach him. I know I can approach it through the Paradise Trinity, functioning in an unlimited sense, because the unlimited function of the Paradise Trinity is the function of the deity absolute at the present time. And if the deity absolute functions, this affects the unqualified absolute because they are united in the universal absolute. Now, whether it goes this route or whether the third person, as the infinite manipulator, operates directly, I don't know. I think it could be either. I prefer the direct theory. It seems simpler to me. And I think if the conjoint actor, who is the god of action, if he can do things which affect paradise and its functions, then I think he can do things which affect the unqualified absolute and its functions. I believe that the original prying loose of some space potency from the grasp of the unqualified absolute is the function of the conjoint actor. The papers say that if he initiates the motions of space, they can't prove it. But they believe he is the ancestor of motion in space. He's the god of action. And this is action. This is initial creativity. And he personified in conjunction with the original creativity, Havona. I think ever since then, he has been initiating. Only the difference is in Havona he also consummated. He still initiates, but his deputies and God's deputies now consummate. I think that through the architects of the Master Universe, the conjoint actor makes known this action. And I think the appropriate architects, the architect in charge of Orvantan, would then dispatch primary force organizers direct from paradise. And I don't think the ancients of days know anything about this. And I don't think the Council of Equilibrium up on Uversa knows anything about this. This is a transaction at the near paradise level of reality. I think the architects of the Master Universe know all about this. I think these primary Master Force organizers come out here and their presence signifies that the conjoint creator has already done this. When they arrive, their presence completes the segregation this quantity, volume, or measure of space potency within the unsegregated remainder of space potency. This space potency came from paradise at the dawn of eternity. It is of paradise origin. The unqualified absolute has been its custodian ever since this eternity event. When the unqualified absolute is the sole custodian of this nebulous stuff of the universe's to be, it is called absoluta, or space potency. When the conjoint actor does that, initiates that, which is then completed on the second stage by the primary master force organizers, it is no longer unsegregated. It is segregated from a larger whole, and it's called segregata, or primordial energy. Now, these primary force organizers do not have to work in the totality or wholeness of the unqualified absolute. They have now got a chunk that they can go to work on. They have framed something within which they can work, and without which, outside of which, they're not going to work. The beginning of anything requires a frame, be it the frame of a concept, the pattern of a spirit, or the segregation of some space potency from all other space potency. These primary force organizers, up until now, have done this by their passive presence. I think the real action took place by paradise deity, by the conjoint actor. But now that they have got segregata, now I think they're on their own. And I think they go actively to work on this segregata to transform it into the first form of puissant, the first form of emergent energy. Let me get my terminology cold here. This segregata is synonymous with primordial force. Primordial means there is nothing before this. But of course there is one thing before this, but it's not anything that anybody can operate on. Primordial force is the first form of force which is manipulatable this side of deity. These primary master force organizers now go to work actively to transform primordial force into something which is emerging from nothingness into somethingness. And that's why the product of their efforts is called emergent energy. Energy emerging from the sole grasp of the unqualified absolute to the grasp of sub-absolute beings. These master force organizers are operating on the second floor of the firehouse. They are transcendental beings. And this is the energy domain of the ultimate, because whenever you're on the second floor of the firehouse, you're dealing with the ultimate. These primary master force organizers continue the manipulation of this energy. And still, the Orbantan government knows nothing of this. Now, out on Uversa, there is a council of equilibrium. The papers don't say much about this. But this council of equilibrium has to do with the mechanical problems of the maintenance of a physical superuniverse. This council of equilibrium is the super-creatural level of thinking, is at that level, and it's made up of associate transcendental master force organizers. These beings work in conjunction with the Orbantan government They are the liaisons, so to speak, between the architects of the master universe and the government of the time-space creations. Members of this council, or I guess they're members, they patrol Urantia, and they are associate transcendental master force organizers. And they're looking for evidence of the work of the primary force.
And now, turn over the cassette, and we'll continue on side 2.